Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 92. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. I do the show each week with my co-hosts, Zach Roberts and Ron Hamilton. Zach!
Hello. How goes
Hello. Ron?
Aloha.
Aloha. All right, well, Around the Lens, in case you've never heard this show before, is a live weekly visual journalism roundtable show coming at you every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We talk about news, topics, and gear related to the world of visual journalism, our career field. Again, that includes photojournalism, broadcast journalism, filmmaking, all that fun stuff. If you want to like, subscribe, share, tweet, any other adjective that is popular nowadays, go to aroundthelens.com and you'll find links to all our social media outlets there. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We should start a MySpace page, but we just haven't gotten around to it, but we will. Anyways, so again, please share the love. Give us some good reviews, some good vibes if you like the show, and please spread the likes to help somebody about the show. Also, we're on Patreon. If you ever want to donate money to us or specifically Zach, please donate to Patreon. We could use your funds. Anyways, we got a great show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about all kinds of interesting stuff. We got the whole Nikon and their, potentially sexist ad campaign. We've got Hurricane Irma, viral photos, and of course our main topic this evening, which is PTSD. So before we get on with the show, let me introduce our panelists this week. Ned, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Ned Johnson, formerly a Marine Sergeant, combat correspondent. Did 2 tours to Afghanistan, one with 1st Marine Division, one with 7th Marine Regiment. I've been shooting really since high school, back when they used this weird film stuff to take it someplace really dark. You guys probably don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so video and photo trained as well. So kind of all the lenses, I think.
Nice. What are you doing now?
Actually just got out a couple of weeks ago. So doing a couple of freelance gigs, one for Hilton for some of their military hiring stuff, and then some webcast stuff.
Okay, great. Glad to have you on. I see you're growing that that freedom beard very well.
Yeah, it doesn't really know what it's doing, so we're just sort of letting it. It's never seen fresh air, so letting it out a little bit, giving it a test run.
Yes, of course. Growing facial hair, the hallmark of any member of the military after they leave the military.
The rite of passage.
The retirement. I'm planning to go myself a mighty retirement beard when I eventually do retire. That's my plan. How long were you in for?
Just short of a decade, so comes out to like 25 to sort of 10 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't know if this relates to what we're talking about, but I mean, obviously, when I was in, once you pass that 8-year mark, it's kind of like, well, might as well just stay in for many people. Although I've known people who've gotten out at 12 years. Do you have any reason in particular why you left the military at that age or that time frame that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I did a 5-year contract initially, and I re-upped. You kind of get into that like extended to go on a deployment, and you get to that year mark, and then you're kind of like, if we do this again, we're at 14.
Yeah.
And ultimately, kids and wife, and tired of being gone. And we have a 3-front war. And I've seen my fair share of combat, so it's kind of ready to move on and be home more often, and around the area
and around the lens, around the area and around a lens.
There we go.
Well, that's great. You said the kids and the wife, of course. How many kids you got?
I've got 3.
Awesome.
So we're crazy.
What ages?
4, 3, and not quite 1. We have a dog, a cat, and 2 rabbits to boot. So,
oh my gosh, slow down, guys!
Crazy. Come to our house. It's fun. It's like a zoo.
Yeah. We've got my 2.5 or 2 3/4-year-old, and then I have a almost 5-month-old. He'll be 5 months here tomorrow, actually, and then we got a dog and 3 cats. So that is quite the family household that we have here. But
I know how
definitely can definitely sympathize with your wanting to be with the family. Absolutely. That's a very important thing, right before we go into North Korea. But anyways, Let's get on with our show. We got a lot to talk about this evening. Let's start with the news. And we got some news going on with Viral Photo. So Petapixel, our friendly neighborhood Petapixel, posted a story about this guy, Michael Scheller, or Seckler, probably Seckler, yeah. Anyways, he posts a photo, very beautiful photo of a manatee that's kind of like stranded in the water here. And I'm just gonna talk about it. I might post it up here so you can get, if you're watching the show, yeah, I'll just post it on here. Why not? Anyways, this guy already gave rights away to everybody pretty much. So anyways, this is the photo in question. It's a manatee that is in the water here. And again, a very beautiful photo, and it gathered tons of attention online. And because of that, it went viral. And when it went viral, basically, he put it on Facebook and he got contacted by media, by a bunch of other entities who wanted to use the photo. And they did, and he basically gave them, carte blanche, a right to use the photo. Now, he did try to charge for the photo when he was approached by a major media entity, the AP. But at that point, basically they said, well, we're not really equipped to pay you or something like that. And he sort of just balked and gave the rights away to the photo. So, I think this is definitely a different take on how to handle a viral photo. And honestly, watching this whole thing, reading this report, and also just kind of, hearing his story, honestly, my first reaction was one of like disappointment, and it kind of almost made me sick that, here we have a perfect opportunity to, defend the rights of the photographer and, the photo itself. But, ultimately, we're dealing with someone who doesn't deal with this all the time, who doesn't do this full time. And essentially they just gave up their rights, after the fact. And I think that is in stark contrast, of course, to Zach, your story with your viral photo. So I'm going to throw it over to you. What do you think of, Michael's situation? And, how do you think that, it was different from your situation? And how can we maybe inform photographers out there about, their licensing rights?
Well, I mean, not just photographers, but anybody who gets a viral photo, even if you're not, I mean, he describes himself as a photography enthusiast.
Right.
But even if you're just that person that got that, great cell phone shot, that video clip or whatever, demand some money, like just demand money. Because not necessarily even if you need it, not because of whatever, but because it sets a precedent. It's kind of like a little bit of solidarity with people that actually do this every day for a living. And also just in general that news organizations have to learn the lesson that they need to pay for the work that they do. They do not do work for free. The guy you see on the TV every night reading off a teleprompter, he gets paid. The producer standing next to the teleprompter, he gets paid. The guy that writes the copy gets paid. Everybody at the network there gets paid. I don't understand why people think, oh yeah, sure, go ahead, do that. It's free. Go ahead, take it. And
it just sickens me that these news organizations, and I'm sure you can attest, their first instinct is to ask for it for free. Yeah. They don't even offer to pay,
Yeah, and 9 times out of 10, it is not a person who has the ability to pay you or say yes to pay. But you say, here's an offer, here's how much money I want, whether it be $50, whether it be $150, whether it be $1,000, like he asked for. The idea that he balked at, I find it hard to believe that if you worked at any other job, if you did anything and you did something slightly, you just picked up a freelance job doing something or did a favor for somebody and you asked for some money and they said, well, I'm not the person you want to talk to, and then just ended the conversation, that you wouldn't try to continue the conversation if you expected some sort of financial return for it. So I don't know why photography, whether it be photojournalism or whether it just be a snapshot like this or something, it isn't expected that you pay for it. So the next question, when he was talking to the AP, should have been, well, if you can talk to the person that it was, get back to me.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't matter. It just come up with a set number, stick to it, and just say, I literally at the end, at kind of the last couple days, by the time I was actually responding to all the messages to request for free use, oh, we're doing a news story on this. Can we use your photo? Sorry, we don't, you know. Well, I'm like, guess what? If you're doing a news story on it, you're doing a news story on it because I took this photo. So the idea that you're doing a news story about something and don't have the budget to at least pay a little bit of money. I mean, especially considering if any of these people ever did any research for my work, they would have found it on my wire, which unfortunately, if you go through my wire, you can find it probably pretty cheap. But like I said before, if the person isn't in the position where they can actually pay you or say yes to paying you, then the next question is just, well, talk to somebody who can, get back to me.
Right.
Or, I mean, if you want to be really aggressive about it, be like, well, Fox News just asked me about it. What were you offering? So
that's the first thing I thought. Like I honestly don't know off the top of my head what I would charge somebody. I don't understand licensing rates, you know, and that got me to thinking about something we'll talk about in a minute. But I mean, my initial reaction would be like, how much are you offering? You know, what kind of rights do you want? Do you want exclusive rights? Do you want, you know, one-time use rights? Do you want, you know, what do you want? And then kind of let them come back with you with like, oh, well, we don't want to pay you. I'm like, I don't give my stock. What is your standard rate? You know, I'm sure they have a standard rate. And then, you know, if you're getting multiple and, you know, requests, maybe you obviously let people bid against each other, you know, like, oh, okay, CNN wants to pay me $500 for this shot for exclusive. What does Fox want to pay me? Oh, $1,000. Okay.
If it's a photo like this where it's definitely, and a photo like mine as well, that, you know, it has an advocacy end to it, and if you do care about that. But the thing is, again, it's really important for you to get that. Like, then you know what? Donate. What I would have done. I mean, like, if it was something for some reason I didn't want any money from it, and it was just a thing, call up the first nonprofit like a Manatee Foundation and just say, I want to give you rights to this. Ask for money for it. Or just say, I want to give you rights to it. So let the nonprofit basically get the credit along with you or something like that. So at least you're benefiting someone. But this literally benefits no one except the Associated Press, which is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Like, and so I just don't understand his entire. Like, if this happened to me, I wouldn't write about it. I mean, if you read, God forbid, again, every time we do a Petapixel story, I say don't read the comments. But if you read the comments, it's like you kind of universally. But the next best thing you can do if you're in a situation where you don't know what to do the thing that you do almost with everything else in life. I don't know how to change my tire. What do? You call up someone that does. You put it on social media. You say, hey, I don't know how to change a tire. Anyone help me out here? Like, and again, I'm putting this out here. Anyone who ever wants to contact me, ZD Roberts on Twitter, ZD Roberts on almost every platform, ZD Roberts at Gmail, shoot me an email. I'll respond as quickly as I humanly can to give you advice on what you should charge. I'm happy to provide that service for free. If you want to give me a kickback, if you want to offer me a kickback, I'm happy to do that. I won't give you contacts on where to sell things because I do that with enough people with my friends. But if you say, hey, Fox News wants to use this photo, how much should I charge for them? I'll give you a number. Then at least you have some idea of where you should go with that. Like, but don't just go, oh, free. Like, I don't understand how that's the reaction to anything. You wouldn't do that with anything else. You wouldn't do that with your labor. You wouldn't do that with at a garage sale. Even if it was just a stuffed animal you're trying to get rid of, you likely wouldn't just go, oh, just take it for free. You'd be like, at least give me 50 cents. You know, so anyway.
I suspect he was just naive about the whole situation. He didn't know anything about how to handle it.
Yeah.
Well, I think he was in a situation where he felt like, oh man, you know, the media needs this stuff. They need it now. It's like time sensitive, you know, and he just kind of felt under pressure and he wasn't used to it. So instead of taking a few minutes and saying, let me get your name and information, I'll call you right back. And doing like, I did a cursory search just now on Google. How do I sell my viral photo? I mean, there's, you know, the top couple entries are like, what do I do with my, you know, there's people asking the exact same question. And, you know, there's a website here called Viral Hog. I've never heard of it before, but, you know, I mean, it looks like it's a, you know, give it your content and they'll give you money, you know, they'll help distribute it. So at a very minimum, I would probably give it to, you know, or at least sublicense it out to something like this. So, you know, someone would make money on my behalf. And then of course say, oh, if you want my stuff, go to Viral Hog and, you know, let them work out. You know, they have much more experience in that. And that was what I was thinking. like, this would be a perfect sort of not job opportunity, but just a potential for like selling your content. You be like open up one of these viral distribution companies, and then when you see something go viral, you talk to the creator and you try and get that content from them and help license that for them. So yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, Zach, he was trying to do the advocacy thing, and promote, do something, tell a good story, and promote this poor manatee, I guess. But it was also not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
I tried to contact the young man. He has not replied back to us for comment. Maybe in a future episode he'll be able to come on and talk to us, but he has not so far replied to me.
How'd you contact him? Via which medium?
Instagram.
Email?
Instagram.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I'll find him. How many Instagram followers does he have?
The sad thing
not many.
Is that this photo.
He's got a small account.
Yeah, the photo has only 400. I mean, only 411 likes. So it didn't even end up with him getting kind of attention. He has 419 followers. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, this sort of thing is so frustrating. Ned, what do you think about this?
Well, my first thought was maybe people don't understand that the AP is a pay to play. If you sell the photo to AP, even if you just give it to AP, everybody else that uses it, as soon as Fox wants it, as soon as your local CBS wants it, before it ends up in their story, they've already paid the Associated Press for their yearly subscription. So that sort of was my first thought, is maybe people think the Associated Press is like a free service of like, this is why every CBS, has the same photos whenever, big story goes nationwide news and everybody has the same photo. People, I think, assume, oh, that just must be the photo. Like somebody said, here's your photo. No, that photo wasn't free. Yeah. OJ standing behind the desk in orange, was an AP photo, and everybody that wanted it had to pay to get into the wire service. Yeah. And so I don't think people realize that when the Associated Press says, hey, can we have this photo? They're about to make money off you. So even if you want the advocacy thing, if that's what he's thinking, I don't think he realizes like the multi-billion-dollar corporation is going to make money off your advocacy. So for me, that was my thought, was he must not know, or maybe a lot of people don't know, that the Associated Press is pay to play. You don't just get free access to those photos. They're paying a yearly subscription, and the AP pays photographers so that they have the biggest collection. Otherwise, you move on to the next, provider of photos. If the AP doesn't have what you're looking for, you can just move on. There's, a half dozen of them or so. You pull, BBC's library or whatever, they have what you want. If you don't have a subscription, you got to pay to get into their wire service. And I think maybe that's something people don't know. I didn't know before we started doing work with the military, and I know they use our photos for free. But I learned that when we told people like, hey, the AP pulls our photos, they would say, oh, well, we have to buy a subscription or whatever. Some of those small town news places don't use the AP. I'm like, oh, wait, buy the AP.
Have you heard of this thing called Divots Hub, which is a free
That's what I was thinking.
source for military imagery?
A lot of them are on Flickr too.
now they're everywhere. But
we know what I was thinking when he said he sold his stuff to the or gave his stuff to the AP. My thinking was, oh man, what's going to happen is somebody's going to use his picture, and the AP is going to come hunting down for money for them and be like, oh, you licensed our picture without permission. Pay us this fee. Yeah. Like they did with that poor photographer who gave away her stuff for free.
Yeah. To the Library of Congress, which
right.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting the level at which, I mean, obviously it's been so long since I've been into this with copyright issues and things like that. I mean, like way over a decade now, but like the idea that he even thought that because he gave Fox News rights to it with only credit, that might have screwed up his idea of being able to charge later, which is beyond infuriating. You can give your photo, it is your product. You can give your labor to free for somebody if you want to. You can but then charge it to somebody else. I mean, you can do what you want. Like, I just want to express that. I just want to, anybody, again, if anybody has any questions, I always try to because I always see on Twitter or Instagram, you see the little producers drop in from all the local networks, say, hey, this is me from KXLF News in South Florida. Would you mind if we use this photo in perpetuity for free? Or they never say for free. They just say, do you mind if we use it? And everybody goes, yeah, sure, no problem.
Or how about this stuff on Instagram? It's like, hey, hashtag use my photo if we can use your photo, whether for the Weather Channel for free forever. And then you look at their terms. If you use that hashtag or something, somehow it binds you to a never-ending contract.
I mean, I doubt that would ever stand up in court. That I just can't imagine.
Your Honor, here's his hashtag.
Yeah, he typed in this hashtag. Clearly, we own the photo and all the rights to it.
You can prove that he signed that hashtag.
Can we start doing that? Just start like writing out a contract around the lens, hashtag Nikon photography. And so anyone who uses this hashtag, we own the rights in perpetuity and can use them for any reason we want. That's not how it works.
We'll do our own. We'll do our own hashtag and try and get imagery for Around the Lens for our website.
That was hacked.
What was that?
You could use the Ted Cruz defense and be like, I didn't hashtag that.
Yeah, it was an intern.
It was one of my staff.
Yeah.
It was one of my staff who liked it. They have been dealt with. It won't happen again.
Yeah. And,
that was
no one noticed it or dealt with it for like an entire, what was it, 12 hours? But yeah, anyway.
I think 2 hours, but I don't remember.
It was longer than that because I had time enough to like find it and it was already in an hour and I was surprised as hell that it was still up. But anyway,
But anyways, the moral of the story is if you're listening to this and you happen to get a viral photo, please don't give it away for free. Please reach out to Zach or myself. Call a friend. Do what you would normally do. Any impulse decision. Like
if Regis Philbin was standing in front of you, sitting in front of you, and you had a couple options, call a friend for God's sakes. And there you go. There's something that's dating me. Regis Philbin has done that show for like a decade. But
I assure you can wait an hour and the news will not like implode if you don't respond immediately.
Or just here.
You have an hour.
Here's a good solid thing. $150, $250. Like $250, they'll say yes or they'll say no. Like there's no they will always pay $250. I promise you if they really want the photo.
But for what? One-time use?
For whatever photo. For one-time use, and really important to say, non-exclusive.
Right.
Like I would charge if it's a viral photo, you can charge more. But I'm just saying if you're really scared in the moment, just remember the number $250, one-time use, non-exclusive. Just remember that.
What would you? Well, I don't think you want to give away your secrets, but if somebody said exclusive and perpetuity, how much?
Depends on the photo. I mean, it really depends. I mean, even when I sold one of my photos to the AP, I made sure that it was non-exclusive. I think it was in perpetuity or something. I actually haven't even signed the contract with him yet. But so just as, I mean, if it's non-exclusive, then if it's one of many frames, I mean, like my photo that went viral, I have there's literally 8 frames of that in that sequence. If somebody wanted one frame in perpetuity, then that would be at least a couple $1,000s.
Right.
And obviously, and again, it also matters. There's a more complicated thing. Do they want it for MSNBC? Do they want it for CNN? Or do they want it for the Cincinnati Daily News or something like that? Or they want it for this small website? Or do they want? And also, I'm a slightly political person. If anyone's ever noticed. And so if it's certain publications, then it's maybe a little bit more. If it's certain other publications, I know what budgets are as well. So, I also then kind of work in, if it's, a tiny publication like Truth Out, I know that they have a limited budget. And if I say, $500, they just literally are not going to say yes to that. Right. The other problem too, that you have to consider, if it's something that's found through social media, they can embed it with no issues. And so it's, which is another reason why always there's a bunch of different apps for both Apple and for iPhone and for Android that you can, every single time you upload a photo, you can automatically watermark it, even just with your name or your website or whatever the heck you want, an image, a branded thing. You can do that. They're pretty easy to use. Highly recommend that if you are a person who you know, gets viral photos every once in a while. If you're a person that covers stuff, whether it's a citizen journalist or not, you know, you should damn well get credit for it. If for no other reason, then if it is a viral photo, it is very important that news agencies can find the person that took it and then find out who they are and talk to them, because that's the only way they substantiate what happened. So if you got a photo of a cop beating up a guy or something like that, put your name to it. I mean, obviously, unless you're scared to do it, but put some level of branding so journalists can find you, because otherwise it's just a random image out on the internet that somebody retweeted and likely other people took down and then reposted. So we have no idea who took the photo, and we can't substantiate whether it's true, what time it happened, what date, where it was, or any sort of information. XF data can be faked. So even if we download the photo and look at that, we have to have that, if, you know, for actual journalists that actually do fact checking. I know they're kind of rare nowadays when it comes to viral photos, but it's really important that your name is attached to that photo, not just for rights and money for you or for anyone else, but so that journalists can actually substantiate it. I mean, there's a really, like, I made sure that at least through my publication, you can get a hold of me. And it was attached to my name always. And I always made sure if it wasn't going to be a site that had like a normal caption credit, that it had my name or my website watermarked on it. So you could actually find me, because otherwise it's just this photo that's out on the internet and you don't know when it happened or how it happened. And yeah, so it's the only way you can actually, if you want to make you want to make the photo have some oomph to it, like this, you know, this guy wanted people to care about manatees, I would assume. And but if, you know, the AP didn't find it on his Twitter or Instagram, they just found it somewhere, they have no idea if it was from hurricane whatever, or if it was just a manatee that got beached. So
right. No, I like that idea, and we can probably have a whole topic on this. But you know, I'm of the mindset that, you know, if you really want to watermark your stuff, and if I did enough newsworthy, if I did news photography on a regular basis, I'd have my, you know, I'd have copyright David Murphy. Here's my phone number. Here's my email. It would all be burned in onto the image. You know, that's how I would do it. I mean, I know there's some, you know, argument against that and for it and whatnot, and we can, like I said, leave that for another day. But you know, that's what I would do.
I disagree. There's no argument against it.
I'm not saying
I argue.
No, I know you don't. I'm just saying I disagree. There's absolutely no argument. If somebody wants to see the photo and wants to see it without a watermark, then they get to pay for it.
Yeah, like when I was doing, you know, photography on film, and you had prints, you would never send the original print, or you never send a perfect print to like a publisher. We were always instructed, you take a knife and you slash like the photo. You take a slash across the photo, so there's a big old mark in it, so they can't copy it. You know, at least that was back in the old days. But anyways, let us move on to our next topic this evening, our main topic this week, which is all about post-traumatic stress disorder. So obviously not a super duper fun topic, but I think it definitely is something valid and worth talking about. You know, of course, that's why we have Ned on tonight, to talk about that and give us his insight as someone who, you know, is, you know, suffering with PTSD and working through it. We'll definitely get his story here. I want to definitely talk about that. But I want to also say, it's, you know, of course, of going, you know, as a military member, as someone who's, you know, seen combat and been experienced or been around that, you know, it's obviously, you know, very easy for that to happen. But, you know, there's also folks like, you know, in the field, like, for instance, our guest, our panelist last week, Aristide, who, you know, experienced it, and he is not military at all, but he was in the middle of 9/11. And, you know, I can't imagine, you know, somebody like Zach or Marcus, who are in these protests all the time, you know, that isn't doing something to their psyche, you know, maybe not now, but maybe years from now. But again, that's all kind of my musings. But I want to turn it over to Ned. Ned, can you talk to us a little bit about your personal experience and kind of how, you know, this sort of diagnosis happened to you?
Yeah, so I guess it all started as a terrible way to start a story. But so 2010, I was deployed with 1st Marine Division. I was a young corporal at the time. And if you're familiar with 2010, as you know, Obama had sent 40,000 new troops, I guess, to reinvigorate the fight in Afghanistan, for lack of a better terminology. And so
Surge, as they call it, right?
Yeah. the big push I was involved in is attached to 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, and then later 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, who got hit pretty hard in the fall timeframe. Every now and then you get to see the like leftover remnants of the social explosion of the Pray for 3.5 that goes out like every September, like clockwork since 2010, and 3.5 hasn't been back to Afghanistan since then.
Right.
So we pushed into Sangin, and for, I don't know, I think I lost count in the 60s, straight days in which every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, whoever's on watch, you know, kicks everybody's boots, because if you don't put your helmet on in the next 10 minutes, you know, something's going to hit the compound and you're going to want your helmet on. So it's like, put your helmet on, put your flak jacket on, and then you can go right back to sleeping under whatever you're sleeping on. But you
just didn't sleep with your flak jacket and helmet on.
You know, you learn. You can sleep with almost anything on at that point, I think. But yeah,
I wanted like a flak blanket, you know.
Yeah,
that'd be the thing to have.
A whole lot of guys wearing boots and a helmet and Kevlar and boxers was kind of a normal 5:30 in the morning thing. But yeah, so we'd wake up to RPGs flying in, machine gun fire at 5:30 in the morning, and that was just sort of our daily wake up call. And we fought, you know, you could see the eyes of the enemy in 6-foot-tall corn, which I don't recommend. If you haven't done in your life, I don't necessarily recommend you go searching that out. I think from a photographer standpoint, the hardest part of it is the moment you take a photo of somebody, you know, they may not know anything about you, but you sort of feel closer to that person because you've captured their image. And then I would find myself days later looking through imagery I had captured, not think anything of it, and go like, oh my God, that guy's not, like, he's not alive anymore. Like, I captured this guy, you know. And for me, you know, everybody that's 5'10" wearing a Kevlar kind of looks the same when you take their picture. And so I had a real hard time with knowing, like, I took a photo of this guy, didn't even know I took a photo of this guy. And then when he died, you know, a day or two later, and I would remember the helicopters coming in. I wouldn't even know I had his photo. I'd find him 3 or 4 days later. And I'm screen watching it, you know, like, what am I doing? Like, why am I not paying more attention to these guys when I'm taking their photos? Like, you know, they're not even going to live, kind of thing. So that was really hard for me. And then I remember decisions. One day we were in a fairly close firefight, and machine gun fire basically turned 6-foot corn, and we were fortunately down in the prone. We were in a cornfield into an open field. Basically, one of those like away fight. It's one of those moments to capture, like, the thing.
Ned, your audio is breaking up a little bit for us.
Especially as a Marine. You know,
Ned, we lost a little bit of your audio there. So can you go back about 10 seconds or so? 10, 15 seconds or so? The joys of the internet, folks.
Ed, can you hear me? I think Ed cannot hear.
All right. Let's give Ned a second to catch up here. All right. Ned, are you with us?
Connectivity problem.
A little bit of connectivity problem.
Am I back?
You're back, I think, for now. Let's try again.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. I have no idea where I was when you lost me.
You're talking about cornfields?
Okay. Yeah, we were in the cornfield. We're taking machine gun fire decisions of like. So I always have a partner, as infantryman, and is like keep the guy with the camera alive. Together, we communicate together, and so I have to decide between my camera and my weapon.
Yeah.
One of the hardest decisions I've had to make in those moments.
Just say mount the camera to the top of the weapon, and then set the trigger to fire every time you fire. Then you're good.
Like would have been a perfect idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I have images from that day that are some of my that I took, where I wondered to myself, like, did I put my risk because I had my camera out when I could have had my and then one of our one of my good friends, actually a couple of weeks from that day, they got attacked. It's a really strange story, and I don't know the whole story, but there were 17 of them at sunset, and 13 of them got medevaced. So they got ambushed, and of 17 guys in a compound, only 4 back to the base. And one of those was one of our photographers. So we had 2 photographers on that. One of them basically burned the barrel of a machine gun me, like straight melted it on the compound wall. Hit by a recoilless rifle. He got medevac home, and I think had 70-something surgeries. And so, because on that operation, and so it's sort of for years like I'm the reason, you know, he got blown up. And so that decision weighed on me. And then ultimately across it, I watched several of my friends die. Photographers, the last thing we joked about was that if he died on the operation he was going to go on, that I'd write a beautiful story in memoriam of him. I guess Marines have a sick sense of humor. Thought it was funny at the time, and then he died 48 hours later.
Oh my gosh. So
he really did not want to have to eat those words. Like it was one of those like, yeah, it'll be great. On my computer, having taken the photos at his memorial ceremony, to be here, like that was a joke. And so, I mean, PTSD is not a beautiful story. So if I tell you I went home and was perfectly fine, that would be all. I was an alcoholic at one point. I was an adrenaline junkie. And ultimately to prove that I was a Marine, and Marines don't get affected by war because war is what we do.
Right.
Which is just bogus in every way.
Yeah.
And I think I think it was a lot of it was I was discredited because guys, you know, that's not. And I think, you know, I see, you know, I haven't seen Restrepo. I don't think I could watch Restrepo really make me sick to my stomach. I was younger. His partner got killed. I think it's Syria. And I don't think people realize that photojournalists and video journalists, like, they get killed in war. One side, and there are that side. And, you know, I had a friend who got jumped in St. Louis a couple of days ago, freelancing as a videographer,
right?
And got jumped in the riots. And so there's definitely an element to capturing what's happening does not make you devoid of what's going on. So I think a lot of people say, oh, you were behind the camera. And I think in a lot of ways it's worse because in those moments you have a human natural instinct that says I should be helping these people. You know, whether it's in war where you think I should be fighting back, or in a riot situation, or if somebody's getting, you know, brutally beat up and you film it, you know, your human instinct says, why am I not stopping these people? But your responsibility as a journalist is to film it. And we know that the documentation of that leads to arrests and to justice. But I think inside you still get that sick feeling of like, why didn't I stop what I was doing and do something? And then you know, if you go onto Facebook, you can see the countless comments of like, who's filming this? Why are they not helping that guy? And they don't understand we have that same, you know, the doctors have their, you know, their Hippocratical oath about, you know, like if somebody is in danger, they have a responsibility, you know, to provide medical care. And we have a similar, we don't have our own oath or creed because we're not that cool. But we should
have a creed.
Yeah. You know, if we have that same responsibility. And I think if you're a true, you know, visual imagery guy, you feel that of like, my responsibility in this moment is to capture this. Because that's what we do. We wouldn't do it if we didn't feel that responsibility. And I think that can create a, you know, a very painful guilt that can manifest it in PTSD, which PTSD is really just a really ugly word for guilt. Almost all the emotions are wrapped into guilt, whether it was I should have done something, or, you know, why did my friends die, you know, when I'm alive?
Survivor guilt.
Right. And really there's, you know, and there's the people who are guilty for being alive just as much as there are the people who are guilty for shooting the enemy, or, you know, whatever decisions they made. And so it's definitely a very real thing. I'm very fortunate in that after 5 years of spiraling wildly out of control, instead of walking away like the average woman would have done, my wife stuck around. And sort of that was the big turning moment for me, was that when I was the absolute worst person you can imagine. And if I told the stories, he would be one of those like, oh, why did we bring this guy on? But she was willing to let me get help instead of just saying, I can't do this anymore. So it's been a very long road. It never goes away. That's the weirdest thing about the diagnosis is you learn that, you know, cancer can go into remission, and even people have stopped having asthma after having had it for 10 years. And you don't ever heal from post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm an advocate that it needs the disorder, because when you make the post-traumatic stress argument, people say, oh, you're experiencing post-traumatic stress. Yeah, so are people who have been in car accidents. You know, they don't feel comfortable driving, and you know, I've experienced a level of post-traumatic stress. So where I think the word disorder needs to belong there is that while some people have experienced the stress of combat, the disorder means that you never fully recovered. And there are things in your brain that come with that. I don't get to go to fireworks. You can ask my little 4-year-old daughter. If you mention fireworks at a baseball game, she gives you a 10-minute story about how daddy went to a faraway land and shot bad guys, and daddy can't do fireworks anymore. And that it won't go away. It's never going to change. And so eventually people in car accidents drive again, and they conquer that initial post-traumatic stress they experienced. But when you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you can learn to fight through it, and you can learn to live with it, but you can never just set it down on the highway one day and be done and be like, hey, I had PTSD for a while, but now I'm good, let's move on with life. So I think that if we take the disorder off of it, we do a disservice to the hundreds of thousands of men and women who deal with it every day, because then it's like, oh, it's just stress. We all have stress, right? You know, like, and then we get back to the like, why can't you just suck it up? Well, because it's not just stress, it's a disorder. You know, the mind has been changed. And so I really advocate that we don't want to drop the disorder. We want people to understand that having a disorder is perfectly okay. I can go to work just like you and millions of other Americans. I can enjoy a great conversation. I can go to war movies. I can do anything and everything that you can do with my mental disorder. But if you cheese it down to just being stress, then somebody goes, well, he really ought to just suck it up and go, you know, do this or that, because they don't understand the difficulties, you know, and it's crowds, you know, you can't just tell somebody with post-traumatic stress to just like deal with a festival crowd. Like, oh, there's going to be thousands of people there. Just deal with it. It's just stress. You're just experiencing stress. No, I'm not. My body is going into fight or flight without my permission because of the disorder. And then I have to conquer my body's natural desire to go into fight or flight. And so I think it's very important that we make it acceptable that you have a mental disorder. And it is. It's perfectly normal. If you're bipolar, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you know, that's perfectly fine. You're a perfectly capable human being that can do all the things the rest of us can do. You just have to deal, you know, with some difficulties. And we all deal with difficulties in our life, so it doesn't change you. But if you take that disorder out, I think you really do a disservice to a lot of people who are dealing with something that isn't just so simple as like, oh, I'll just eat something and I'll feel better.
Any thoughts from either of you guys on what Ned has said, you know, and any similarities, I guess, from anything you've experienced, Zach, yourself? I mean, do you have any sort of, I mean, talk about shooting something like a riot or a protest. I mean, that's fight or flight right there. And any sort of similar sort of instincts from that, or is it?
I mean, to
not in the same ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, not even in the same ballpark. But I certainly, you know, after you know, years of covering protests and riots and, you know, and kind of everything that goes with it, I can't. I get extraordinarily nervous, and, you know, again, I want to preface, nowhere near. I don't even think nowhere near PTSD issues, but like I have a really, really hard time being around more than like a couple police officers, because I've been beaten by those guys more than enough times. I just being in large crowds does bother me, especially if you get cornered, where if I feel really like I can't get out, because that's what happened when I was trampled and then beaten by a couple police officers. So I mean, the longer term effects of like Charlottesville, but I've yet to be seen. But yeah, no, I know almost every photographer I know has like a photojournalist that actually covers whether it be American combat or, you know, I mean, has some level of like, let's just say issue, like not anything as deep as anything else, but you know, but yeah. So,
Ron, you were in the Marine Corps. Any thoughts from your perspective?
Marine Corps was extremely dangerous for me, of course. I had to work with electronics, and I could have got shocked, I suppose, and that would have been bad. I'm still frightened by hair dryers to this day. But no combat here, and no bullets flying in my direction. So, and then as far as my protests in Hawaii, we've talked about it ad nauseum. They're pretty gentle
like,
around here.
Down with good weather, down with beaches, right? That's kind of the protest.
Well, we don't have peaches, but we have pineapples. So yeah, no. When we have our same thing, we have gay marriage debates, and we have I don't know, whatever else. But it's pretty civil out here. It's a different kind of life, and we live on. The only stresses we have here in Hawaii is hard to pay the rent. That's our stress in Hawaii.
Right.
Apart from that, we have no problems.
I mean, it is something that I think that can possibly bring a lot of us, a lot of like the edges of different, whether it be military or, I mean, I've talked to a lot of military guys who we have a lot, you know, us and photos, obviously we're both Ned, but so, you know, where we have a lot of the same deals going on, and where we, you know, maybe experience extraordinarily different, scenarios, but we have a lot of the same issues, and you know, it's one of those things that I hope that we can actually kind of deal with together, and deal with, you know, and kind of getting the normalization. I don't want to say normalization of the fact that this exists, but the fact that people have to, because I've gotten even that from my mom when it comes to like chronic depression and other issues, where it's just like, oh, just work through it. You just have to work through it. It's like my body is physically telling me that I can't, so there's no way I can tell my body not to do that thing. Like, so it's amazing just how even people who know and recognize that mental issues exist will still try to say, we'll just work through it, especially when it like it's something that annoys them, you know, especially like it or inconveniences them. I've had issues with that with, you know, some family members and other things before, where it's just like, no, it's my body physically will not allow me to do this. I can't just work through this thing. And it's one of those things that I think a lot of media have, and obviously vast swaths of the military have, and hopefully, you know, we can keep trying to push out those stories that tell the stories that people have this issue, and that we have to just try to get kind of the rest of America to realize, the people that put their bodies physically between, basically put their bodies in places where they shouldn't probably be, whether it be in the military or whether it be in the press, or just even, you know, people who were attacked. I mean, I have friends that were sexually assaulted that have, for the rest of their life, they'll have these issues, and, you know, people will still say, just work through them, just somehow do it. And it's like, well, no, my body. There's a comedian I was listening that was talking about, he has panic attacks, like full-fledged like disabling panic attacks, and he was joking. He's like, my mother tells me, well, just work through them. It can't be that bad. It's like, what? Just like you're panicked? And it's like, yeah, it's like panic. It's like panic is actually trying to kill me. Like, there is this thing trying to actually kill me. So if I could just work through that idea that something is trying to kill me actively, like my own brain is, yeah, no, that wouldn't be a problem. It's super easy to just work through that, you know. I mean, and so it's amazing. Like, maybe we just have to do it person by person to kind of work through it. But yeah, I don't know.
So what are you doing now, Ned, to kind of work through the issues? I mean, obviously, you know, you've got a family and whatnot, and you're trying to, you know, do your job and stuff. I mean, do you seek therapy on a regular basis, or, you know, what is the military supporting you? Yeah, so,
well, I consider myself to be kind of a hippie. So one of the things we use is essential oils that help essentially balance the chemicals. So for a festival or something, I have a roller ball of oils. So we sort of have a 911 version, which is like oh my goodness, like I'm gonna freak out and low crawl out of this place. Right. And then I take stuff before we go. If I know, like, hey, we're gonna go into the downtown, you know, DC or whatever, then I'll put on various ones before we leave. You know, give it, you know, 20 minutes or whatever to start working. Maybe it's a placebo effect. Maybe it really works. I don't have a good answer for you. I'm not a doctor, but I know that really helps. I see a therapist. Actually, one of the things that has really saved me has been my dad, who, one of the strongest men I know, and has been the like buffer between me and my mom, who's like scared to death I was gonna die in Afghanistan. Like the day I enlisted, like she was somehow convinced that you could like sign up at MEPS in Dallas and die in the same 24-hour window. But he has been very like, just lay it on me, like as ugly as it is, as painful as it sounds, as awful, like don't try to defend me from that. And that's really been a huge thing, to sort of just, you know, when I have a really bad day, to have somebody that as close as my dad, that I can just say, you know what, like this is awful, like this kind of pain and guilt and agony is more than I can withstand right now. And so I think that's huge, because you can tell a therapist all the lies you want, you know, like And I've been down that road too of like, oh, how are you doing today, Ned? I'm your therapist. And like, I'm great. I haven't punched any holes in any walls today. You know, and you don't know that person. And so what level of trust can you, you know, have? You know, they have professional license and they're not allowed to tell people things. You know, but having my dad as somebody I can really say, like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through today. And
Right.
he would say, you know, let me carry some of that, has been huge. And that really is like, people say like, you have to work through it. I don't advocate for that because that's such a bogus concept. But there definitely is something about somebody that you can truly trust, that you can say the ugly things to, and they can withstand. I mean, I've said some pretty gnarly things. One of them was like, at one point I genuinely had a like feeling of like, not an urge that like I wanted to harm people, but that just like everybody on earth being dead would kind of somehow alleviate the problem. And I've said that out loud. And I've had some people in my life who are strong enough to say, hey, I don't know where that feeling comes from, but like, let's just deal with it. Why do you feel that way? It's okay to feel that way. And so that's been huge. And then I don't want to get super spiritual on your podcast, but I do use a program. It's called Reboot Combat Recovery. And the idea behind it is essentially your body, your mind, and your spirit are all wounded in combat. And so you have to heal all three. And so sort of the missing link in that is this spiritual aspect, because you go to a therapist and they talk about your parents and how you grew up and how it makes you feel. But for 99% of the world, we believe that there's some sort of spirit in the human body, something that isn't a part of us. It's a greater thing. And if that's wounded, you know, you're going to have the same problems as if your body is wounded, or if your mind is wounded. So it just addresses the spiritual aspect and how you have to heal spiritually as well. You know, something I think Zach was sort of talking about when he was talking about, you know, people say just get over it. The strangest thing I think I've experienced is there was a point in time where I think people thought you could catch PTSD from me. And so people I was close with would warn other people I knew and say, oh, you should be careful around him. He has PTSD.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, it's not contagious. It's not, you're not going to get it, I promise. Like, unless I start shooting, you know, you're not likely to get PTSD.
Well, they also
just wear protection. Just wear protection. You'll be
they have
fine.
this idea of, you know, I mean, like how PTSD is portrayed in like movies and TV. It's like, well, it's the only time you hear about PTSD is when like occasionally the suicide rate comes out from the military. Okay, there's a shooting related, and they put it on PTSD related issues, or in the movies where it's, you know, some guy beating up some people or stuff like that, or, you know, like the terror, you know, old 70s war films from people coming back from Vietnam, you know, and having issues, you know, Rambo and such, and so I think that people are scared that, you know, because they have this portrayal that anybody with this issue is ready to just snap, and if you have to be careful around them, and it's just, you know, it's not it's not only not true, but also it's almost more dangerous because you're treating people like, you know, treating people differently in a not in a positive way, at least, but.
Right.
I mean, it's absolutely the dramatization of PTSD in media that will, you know, generate that kind of thought. Because I mean, when you talk about, I'm thinking like the homeless guy or whatever who, you know, goes into a trance and then starts killing people and stuff. You know, that's you know, that's the popularized Hollywood opinion. So it's absolutely, it can be not accepted but understood why some people would feel that way, not knowing it, you know, firsthand.
Right. I have a funny anecdote about that, actually. So people sort of get caught up in that, like you're going to have a flashback and you're going to suddenly think that the guy at 7-Eleven is the Taliban. And so my wife and I used to go to Disney when I was stationed in California, and they do fireworks different times at different parks. And so there's 2 different parks, and you can like, oh yeah, we know this park, they do it at 10:30, and then you like forget that the park that's 500 feet away does theirs at a different time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We're outside one of the shops, and me and fireworks, we don't get along, and like, I mean, like Canelo, Triple G kind of don't get along. And so the fireworks start happening, and I had a flashback that was as real as I could imagine. And to what I thought was amusing, I almost tackled a Disney worker
Oh my
for
gosh.
fear that she would get blown up. So I'm screaming at her to get down as I'm getting down behind like a pile of Disney sweatshirts. And so I think people get caught up in that, like, oh, you're going to have a flashback and you're going to kill everybody. And I'm like, what a ridiculous concept. Like, you've obviously never been to war, or you would know that there's a whole lot more than just shooting the enemy involved in the terror of it. And so you can, to this day, you can walk behind me and throw those little firework poppers down on the ground, little white things that everybody has at the 4th of July.
Yeah.
It sounds just like a round snapping over your head. It sounds like incoming fire. I'll drop to one knee. You can walk up right behind me. I won't know you have them. You throw one down on the ground, and I will drop to a knee because my natural instinct says incoming fire, get down.
Yeah.
And so I don't think people.
I won't be doing that, Ned. You can relax. I won't do that to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Most of the people in my life know that that is like a good fire way to put my heart rate at about 190 and get me to dive face first onto the asphalt, so they know better.
You tell them not to do it too, Ned. Don't take that, buddy.
They know, trust me. You should see my kids. They'll warn about anybody. If you like mention fireworks in the middle of January, like out will come my children. You can't do that around my. But yeah, they don't realize that my natural instinct is to get down and then to get others down.
Yeah.
So when I've had those moments, I've screamed like I was a corporal of Marines at poor people who are like, "Why is this guy screaming at me to get behind cover?" So it's not
if you'd taken down like one of those guys in the costume, that would have just been perfect. Get down, Mickey.
The poor lady. By the time I was like back in Disneyland instead of in my own mind, the poor lady was like, "What happened?" And then here comes my wife, who's like, "Hey, why don't you go to the sweatshirt section and hide out?" We've had our Disney plan in place for a while. It's like I go into the furthest corner and hide out in the soft sweatshirts because it softens some of the reverberations.
Yeah.
But
no, I'd be overjoyed if they just stopped fireworks, just in general. I know other people enjoy them, but yeah, I don't have it anywhere near as bad. But after Ferguson, I can't enjoy them. Just random things that sound like gunshots around. I'm not a fan of at all. So yeah.
Yeah, I know that.
That kind of makes me. Like you said, you can go see like war movies and stuff, but that doesn't affect you. Well, what's the difference?
That might not have necessarily been the truth. So it would depend. Saving Private Ryan is one of my all-time favorite movies, but it just doesn't. It doesn't send the same level of, I guess, recognition. There's not a lot of explosions in those kinds of movies that don't sound very realistic. But then we went to see, it was the Chris Kyle movie. I don't even remember what it's called, American Sniper.
Yeah.
So my unit was like, oh, we should go see this movie about this Navy sniper in the Marines. And so I like warn everyone. I'm like, look, like you guys are going to need to give me some space because like at some point I'm going to have to panic, run out of this movie. I didn't want to not be a part of it. Because that's the worst part of the PTSD. It's like, oh, everyone's going to the fireworks. So like, I'm going to sit home and play Xbox. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go along.
Play some Call of Duty.
The hardest part of that movie for me, actually, so Chris Kyle comes back from, the deployment. And the most realistic thing that sent me out of the theater was actually the fights he had with his wife in the movie.
Right.
And she, you're not even here. It's like you're, someplace else. And it was so realistic because I was like, man, I have had that exact fight with my wife. Like I've had those same conversations with my mom, with my friends. So that was actually the horrifying part of it, was that when they displayed his troubles at home, it was way too close to home. And so I think probably a half dozen times during that movie, they put me in the middle. I have no idea why. Somebody was like, yeah, we'll flank him and that'll make him feel safe. So about a half dozen times during that movie, my heart rate goes to the like 2:05, 2:10, and I'm like jumping over people. Like I have to get out of this movie theater. So for me, anything that's like, I don't know, I don't think I could get through Restrepo. I want to see it so badly because the story is just, when I was younger, is just an incredible storyteller. I've read the book. I just don't think I could get through it. I think I would literally freak the heck out.
Right.
But yeah, so I think it's the Iraq, Afghanistan really brings back those things. And you know, the Vietnam, World War II movies, they just seem so distant, so unrealistic to what I saw. You know, and I know for the World War II guys that when they watch those movies, you know, it brings to life all those memories. So I think that's where, you know, because to me, like, you know, American Sniper or whatever it was called, it wasn't a war film. Was, you know, a reenactment of something I'd done. So when I say like I can go watch war films, like I mean things I haven't seen. And you know, I can go to an action movie and it could be 100 explosions in a, you know, a Sylvester Stallone movie or something ridiculous, because they're just not, you know, it's not real. It doesn't even remotely sound like a real explosion. You know, I spent 3 years on Camp Lejeune, and every time they're practicing mortars, those reverberations, you know, my heart rate starts to go up. Man, how much longer should I do this before I should get out and away from these kinds of things? So it's definitely the more realistic stuff, and then the war films, you know, they're just not close enough to home, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, I was gonna say, how has has PTSD affected your ability to do visual journalism at all? I mean, I know you're working and doing some stuff, obviously out in the civilian world. I mean, but is there any considerations you have to take or think about, or is it pretty much just, you know, as long as there's nobody throwing firecrackers, you're fine?
I think you know, a lot of what I've been doing has been more just like studio or family style photography, and not really on the journalism aspect of it, which I think is really where I'm sort of comfortable now when it comes to the lens. I like the idea of controlling the action, you know. You stand here, let's wait for the light to be perfect. On my second deployment, I walked patrols on the same fields I had walked through, and what little relief I had seen prior to that deployment came all crashing down. So I would probably try to stay away from anything that might potentially stir up those feelings or potentially make it worse. So from a day-to-day aspect, you know, when I'm in DC, the sheer number of people sort of puts me on edge. But I've really just learned to fight through it, and you know, you come up with coping mechanisms. I don't leave the house without a plan. You know, what do I do if we get here and there's 10,000 people and I start to have a panic attack? I always have some sort of plan in place for how are we going to get out of here? Who could I call and try to talk myself down a little bit? Do I have my oils with me? You know, if we take the car, sometimes I can go to the car and just the silence and the emptiness of a minivan, you know, can sort of like do some pregnancy deep breaths kind of thing and sort of try to reset. So really that's what it comes down to, is every day you have to, when you get up in the morning, you have to account for it, because if you don't, you'll suffer the consequences. And ultimately, what that really leads to is my family suffers the consequences, because I make bad decisions. Yeah, I've gotten out of the car on a highway before, because for some reason my brain in a panic attack was like, why don't we just put the car in park in the middle of the highway in California and just get out? And then you're out there and you're like, I'm on a highway and everyone's going 80 miles an hour. Like, why did I get out of the car? And then you don't have any idea what to do. So really, you know, if you don't have a plan, you put yourself and others at risk. So that's the thing is, if you take a day off from knowing like I have something I have to deal with today, you know, then you run that risk of finding yourself someplace and you get into that panic attack, and then there is no just like, hey, I'll just chat myself right out of this panic attack until we all feel good again. So really that conscious, today I'm going to make sure that I have my plan in place and that I have all of my resources to be able to handle it. And that's again where my dad comes in, and that I know when I leave the house that if I have my cell phone, I always have somebody I can call. So that's always sort of part of the plan, is like I could always call my dad, and he would, you know, listen if I want to scream or rant or whatever it may be, or if he needs to talk and I just need to be quiet and freak out. You know, I have that option too. So you just have to be vigilant. It's like any other disorder. You know, if you don't take your heart medication and you have a heart disease, you know, you put yourself at risk. And PTSD is that same thing. You have to, every day you have to do what it takes for you, and everybody is different. But the big thing I would say is, if you're suffering from it, and Zach, I would tell you, you know, the same thing. Don't just think like, oh, it's normal, I've seen some stuff, and of course I would feel this way. You know, find the resources, get the help. There's absolutely nothing shameful in saying you need help. You know, the fact that I consider the most manly thing you can do is to say you can't do something alone. In 2017, everyone thinks like, oh, you know, the best thing you could be is the strongest person you know, the best, the fastest, and the biggest. And that's just not true, because really the best thing you can be is someone who's not afraid to ask for help when you can't do it all. So that would be my, you know, if you're a photojournalist out there and you know, if you try to compare yourself to the Vietnam guys and you went to Iraq or Afghanistan, like, you're going to fall short. And, you know, the Vietnam guys are going to fall short to the guys that charged the beaches in the Pacific. But it isn't about who saw the worst. It is about you. And if you have issues, get help, because they'll start small and you may think like, oh, it's not that big a deal, I just drink and then I don't have to think about it.
Sorry, as I put my glass down, but yeah.
You know, eventually you're going to have to drink more and more and more, you know, or whatever it may be that is your vice. You know, get the help you need, because just because you think like, oh, these people saw so much worse, and I get that all the time when I talk to people. It's one of the things we talk about in Reboot. It's one of the first things I say when I introduce myself to the group, because I do kind of lead the group a little bit, but it's a group discussion. One of the things I say is we don't tell a whole lot of combat stories. One, there's really nothing cool about killing other people. And two, there's no reason to compare. We got no business in deciding who saw the worst thing or who participated in the worst action. That doesn't accomplish anything. And so that would be my advice to photographers who are out there. If you're dealing with stress, you know, if you shot something and you think about it a lot, or you go, man, you know, I used to be perfectly fine in public, but now I sort of don't like to have my back to the restaurant. Those are not just feelings. It's a real thing. You know, so seek help. That doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean you've lost your mind. But don't just ignore it and think like, oh, I've never seen my friend die in my arms. You know, if you've experienced stress of any kind, car accident, you know, rape, like we talked about earlier briefly, combat, you know, even just getting beat up in the back alley of New York City because the guy wants your wallet, can affect you for the rest of your life. You can walk, you know, kind of like constantly looking over your shoulder. So really, I would say reach out. There's dozens of resources, especially if you're a veteran. Like, you can start typing veteran into Google, and I think it fills in PTSD resources like almost instantly. Find somebody, tell them what you're dealing with, and get the help you need. And then, you know, we've talked about my regimen. It works for me. It will not work for everybody. Not everybody has, you know, the same mind. Not everybody has the same chemical imbalance. Not everybody deals with things the same way. But I would encourage you, seek help before it really is too late.
Can't agree.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing. And, you know, just like you can call Zach for licensing issues, PSD issues. No, but
no,
I do want to
seriously though, if anybody's listening and has issues, I'll try my damnedest if you reach out to me and talk. I have a lot of friends, and I have a lot of really good support network with friends that, you know, whether they went through assaults or what they went through, and we kind of just vent every once in a while to each other, or, you know, if we're actually in the same town together, we actually can go out and get food and talk and kind of like talk about how things are affecting ourselves and kind of talk our way through it. And if you don't have somebody, you know, reach out, and, you know, I can hopefully, maybe I can put you in touch with somebody in your town that you can, like, we all know about a lot of photographers out there. And I think that, and if you're a photojournalist, obviously, but if you're, you know, just in general, you know, definitely reach out to me. I am not in any way, shape, and form trained to help anybody. Believe me, I need help myself. But if you just need somebody to talk to, or just kind of go like, where do I try to begin to try to deal with these issues? I mean, I know your friend in St. Louis. We worked the inaugural, I think, together, and yeah, no, I mean, there's going to be a lot, I think, in the coming months, unfortunately, in America, there's going to be a lot, and years, there's going to be a lot more photojournalists out there that have dealt with a lot of things that possibly not even an entire generation since like the civil rights era have seen and dealt with on a daily basis. And I think we're going to have a lot more people in our community that are going to have to be seeking some sort of level of help, and should be help. But there's no, I mean, the veteran issues, there's a huge lack. There's a lot of help out there, but still not enough. But I think in the world of photojournalism, I don't even know. I know that there's like training to go into combat, but I don't know. I personally don't know of any help that's there specifically for photojournalists who are coming back from combat, and whether that be in Iraq, Afghanistan, or in St. Louis, or in Charlottesville, or in DC or New York. And that's, I think, something that probably as a community, we're all going to have to start figuring out very, very quickly. Because, you know, it's suicide and everything like that is a big problem within obviously nowhere near as a big problem, but it's a problem within photojournalism. You know, we've lost some of our greatest photographers to it. And yeah, it's like I said, it's just something we're going to have to, I think, really start having a conversation with very, very quickly. Probably something we should have started, 40 years ago, but something we're definitely going to have to deal with soon.
All right, well, let's go move on to our last topic this evening. It's been an excellent conversation. Definitely, thank you so much again for sharing, everybody. Let's close it off with something maybe a little bit we can kind of poke fun at here. Now, I'll bring this up. I thought we figured this out. First of all, I want to hold Ron and Zach to task here. Guys, we had this conversation, I think it was like last week. Yeah. We fixed the diversity issue, and now what happens? Nikon puts out an ad here for just 32 Nikon D850 Pros, and apparently there's no women who are D850 Pros, at least within Asia, the Middle East, or Africa. So who would have thought, right? But yeah, anyways, Nikon's getting a ton of flack from this, and it's definitely something that I think is raising good questions about overall diversity. But let me throw it to you all. What do y'all think? Let's start with you, Ron.
Well, I was also listening to the Australian guy. What's his name? Photographer on YouTube. He was saying, I can't think of his name right now. He was saying,
Tog Life?
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, what's his name? The Nikon guy. That Nikon guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was saying that in Australia they don't have any Nikon ambassadors there either. In the
female Nikon ambassadors, or just at all.
No, I'm sorry, female Nikon ambassadors in Australia either, he said. So I think also, now when I was with the paper, it was about 50-50 for the photojournalists. It was about 50-50 here in the state, male to female. Honestly, it wasn't heavily male, really. It was almost 50-50. in my particular paper, in my particular department. At the
I can say
TP
from my
station I
time, and
worked
you know,
at-
you can. I
Go
can say from
ahead.
my time, and you can probably back this up too. You know, Ned. You know, we in the military, there's tons of diversity.
Right, and then right, and my television station is, I don't know, maybe majority women. Honestly, when I go to the Philippines and I look at the broadcast station, there's a whole lot of females there. Probably 70, I don't know, maybe 65, 40, I don't know, 35. I don't know, whatever it is. It's a lot of women there anyway. So the diversity, I don't know why it's not more represented in the Nikon universe.
Right.
Well,
Back, you know why it's not represented.
I mean, we know why it's not. I mean, I look at, I don't like bad mouthing Nikon. I love Nikon. I don't know where my NPS button is and everything like that. But I mean, the president of Nikon kind of has a history of this, where it's just so, it's the fact he doesn't even think of it as sexism or even as bias. I mean, like his last, when they were talking about building a mirrorless camera and building a new one, specifically talking about making a camera that would fit in the hands of a woman that we would need to. I mean, it's just, it's a huge problem at Nikon. It's a huge problem at Canon. I looked up the Canon Europe ambassadors, and there's 12 men to 1 woman. I mean, this is not, the two big companies have a huge problem with this. And specifically in, you know, I mean, this is representative of Asia and you know, and it's going to be a bigger, it's going to be a bigger issue there, which has, especially at a corporate level, has a very even worse problem than we have, I think, probably in America, when it comes to diversity and pay and everything across the board. So it's not an unknown problem. It's a known problem that I don't believe that Nikon, hopefully this will make a big difference, because this is so obvious and so blatant, that maybe they'll start at least making some strides towards it, towards changing it. But I don't know. I'm not necessarily positive about it.
Any thoughts from you, Ned, on this whole Nikon debacle?
Yeah, I think my favorite portion of it was the, like, I can't wait for the 850W in pink.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think really I think it's a testament to the fact that for so long, news stations, both print and broadcast, have been a man's domain. They've been owned by men. They've been run by men. And so nobody has even cared up until recently whether or not the cameras or the people behind them were, you know, female. It was just sort of a like subsect of like, oh yes, there's women taking, you know, October family photos. I think that's where a lot of, you know, men professional photographers identify the like, oh yeah, it's okay if women buy cameras and take little cutesy photos for pregnancies and things like that. But I don't think you see the same kinds of respect from a you know, professional photographer. And I don't know if that's, and I don't know a whole bunch of names, you know, like Ansel Adams comes to mind. I know he's male, you know, but I don't know that there's been a sort of landmark female photographer where, you know, if she got brought up at the table, all the talented, you know, respected men photographers would all go, yeah, she can like play with the big dogs. And so one, I think that is because they've been ignored, because from my experience in the military, most of the female photographers we had were better than we were.
Right.
They were more dedicated to the craft and more interested in the equipment. You know, and I think that's a testament to the fact that really women can't be kept down. Like, you can take 32 pictures of male photographers, but the women are probably still taking better photos than those 32 guys. So, yeah, I think it shows that, you know, in their minds, women are still just a subsect of the photography world. They have their little niche and it's cute, and we're glad that we don't have to go out and take those ridiculous pregnancy photos. You know, but when it comes to professional cameras, you know, men taking real photos that matter, they're not even in the conversation. And I think that really tells you where the journalist world stands on that. It's okay if they're in front of the camera, and we're fine with CNN having a blonde co-host or whatever it may be. But we haven't gotten to a point where we're willing to say, hey, the best photographer AP has ever signed in the last 10 years, is Michelle or whatever it may be, because they're just not in the conversation. We're not even willing to consider that, the best photographer out there could be a woman. And until somebody's willing to admit that's possible, Canon and Nikon are just a symptom of the journalist world saying they can't be behind the camera.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it is interesting though, because Lindsay Addario, which for some reason I thought she shot Canon, she actually shoots Nikon, and she not only does have I think it was a best-selling book about being a photographer, but also she's getting her own movie. And there's not too many male outside of the Bang Bang Club. I can't think of any other male photojournalists that are actually having their own film. So hopefully that film comes out and kicks ass and kind of, does the sort of thing that Hidden Figures did for, African American women at NASA and things like that, because we all know, like each one of us know a whole crap ton of amazing, it's a really bad measure for it, but a whole ton of amazing, stunning women, female photojournalists who are usually better than us. But like, for some reason, I'm not quite sure how people are missing how the guys that run camera companies or even buy photos and things like that are missing them, because they're out there, and at every single event we go to, they're there, and somehow the people that are buying the photos and selling the cameras seem to miss it. It's kind of perplexing to me.
I was hoping that I could rub this all in your all faces, because in case you didn't know, I happen to shoot with the Lumix brand of cameras.
Yeah.
Specifically the GH5. I don't mention that very often. But of course, Lumix has their own Lumix luminaries. So I thought, I'm going to go to the luminary page, and it's not going to be nothing but like diversity.
Yeah.
So all luminaries are white.
Yeah, of course.
And with the exception of two women who are not by themselves, they're paired with a guy. So it's like a couple, Jennifer, like Charles and Jennifer Maring, or, it seems like husband and wife teams.
Well, of course,
there are no single women by themselves.
He wasn't there to mentor.
Right, of course, raise up the women, teach them how to photograph, help them hold the camera, like the golf swing.
By the way, I love the story. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sebastião Salgado, amazing black and white photographer, does these enormous portraits. Go Google him, you'll recognize his photos. The only reason he's signed with Magnum. He's one of the few photographers that sells prints for like tens upon tens of thousands of dollars. Has at least had like a dozen best-selling photo books. So there's preface there, but the only reason he even picked up photography is because of his wife. And so it's always interesting when you hear the stories of like a lot of like really big name photographers. There's usually a woman there too, but.
All right. Well, it looks like we have some more work to do. So Ron and Zach, after this, we're gonna really dig in, fix that diversity problem in our industry. But that pretty much ends our show for this week. I want to thank our panelists so much, Ned, for coming on and talking with us about, of course, your personal experience and just chit chat with us about the news. Ned, is there anything you'd like to shout out to, direct us to, either your work or something you'd like us to kind of focus on from you?
I think I'm nedajohnson.com if you're really interested in looking at some of my images. There's a couple of websites and things I'm really passionate about, including PTSD is on there. And then, like Zach mentioned too, if you're suffering from PTSD or you're concerned you might be, and you're a photojournalist, you can email me. I'm nedajohnson@gmail.com. Spelled just like it sounds. It's stupid simple. And I'm glad to talk or point you to resources. And like Zach, I have dozens of friends that have seen combat or have shot some of the riots and things like that. Even if you're just slightly unsure if maybe it's not okay to feel the way you feel, please reach out. I'd be glad to help. Absolutely.
That's Ned, traditional spelling with 2 Z's and a silent Q, right?
Yes. Yeah, people constantly ask me what my full name is. I don't have a solid answer yet. It's
Nedrick.
That's what my parents gave me. So yeah, it's just N-E-D and then A Johnson. So.
Yeah.
And Nedbert Van Wisselsash. Yeah. Go ahead, Zach.
I did want to mention, because I literally was like searching it as we're talking about, there is a check out diversify.photo. That's the, as in .com, it's .photo. And it's a entire database of photographers, a lot of women, and a lot of basically a whole bunch of people who aren't necessarily white males. And it's a great site that allows photo editors to see their photos and potentially contact them to hire them to work for them. So if you're not a white male and you're listening, definitely check out that. Maybe try to sign up with it. A continual guest of ours, Andrea Wise, helped start it, which is why I know of it. And it's also just a whole bunch of really stunning photographers. So you should go check it out. Diversify.photo.
Excellent.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ned, for your time. For Ron Hamilton and Zach Roberts, I am David J. Murphy. This has been Around the Lens, episode 92, and we are out.